Blackshirts and Reds by Michael Parenti. Section: Memories of Maldevelopment. In Chapter 2, I discuss the role of popular revolution in advancing the condition of humankind. That analysis would apply as well to communist revolutions, and is worth reiterating in the present context. We hear a great deal about the crimes of communism, but almost nothing about its achievements. The communist governments inherited societies burdened with an age-old legacy of economic exploitation and maldevelopment. Much of pre-communist Eastern Europe, as with pre-revolutionary Russia and China, was in effect a third-world region with widespread poverty and almost non-existent capital formation. Most rural transportation was still by horse and wagon. The devastation of World War II added another heavy layer of misery upon the region, reducing hundreds of villages and many cities to rubble. It was the communists and their allies who rebuilt these societies. While denounced in the U.S. press for leaving their economies in bad shape, in fact, the Reds left the economy of Eastern Europe in far better condition than they found it. The same was true of China. Henry Rosemont Jr. notes that when the communists liberated Shanghai from the U.S.-supported reactionary Kuomintang regime in 1949, about 20% of that city's population, an estimated 1.2 million, were drug addicts. Every morning there were special street crews, quote, whose sole task was to gather up the corpses of the children, adults, and the elderly who had been murdered during the night or had been abandoned and died of disease, cold, and/or starvation. End of quote. During the years of Stalin's reign, the Soviet nation made dramatic gains in literacy, industrial wages, healthcare, and women's rights. These accomplishments usually go unmentioned when the Stalinist era is discussed. To say that, quote, socialism doesn't work is to overlook the fact that it did. In Eastern Europe, Russia, China, Mongolia, North Korea, and Cuba, revolutionary communism created a life for the mass of people that was far better than the wretched existence they had endured under feudal lords, military bosses, foreign colonizers, and Western capitalists. The end result was a dramatic improvement in living conditions for hundreds of millions of people, on a scale never before or since witnessed in history. State socialism transformed desperately poor countries into modernized societies, in which everyone had enough food, clothing, and shelter, where elderly people had secure pensions, and where all children, and many adults, went to school and no one was denied medical attention. Some of us from poor families, who carry around the hidden injuries of class, are much impressed by these achievements and are unwilling to dismiss them as merely, quote, economistic. But what of the democratic rights that these people were denied? In fact, with the exception of Czechoslovakia, these countries had known little political democracy in the days before communism. Russia was a czarist autocracy. Poland was a rightist dictatorship with concentration camps of its own. Albania, an Italian fascist protectorate as early as 1927. Cuba, a U.S.-sponsored dictatorship. Lithuania, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria were outright fascist regimes allied with Nazi Germany in World War II. Then there were the distorting effects that an unremitting capitalist encirclement had upon the building of socialism. Throughout its entire 73-year history of counter-revolutionary invasion, civil war, forced industrialization, Stalinist purges and deportations, Nazi conquest, Cold War, and nuclear arms race, the Soviet Union did not know one day of peaceful development. In the attempt to maintain military parity with the United States, the Soviets took on crushing defense costs that seriously depleted their civilian economy. In addition, they faced monetary boycott, trade discrimination, and technological embargo from the West. The people who lived under communism endured chronic shortages, long lines, poor quality goods and services, and many other problems. They wanted a better life, and who could blame them? Without capitalist encirclement, they would have had a better chance of solving more of their internal problems. All this is not to deny the very real deficiencies of the communist systems. Here I want to point out that much of the credit for the deformation and overthrow of communism should go to the Western forces that tirelessly dedicated themselves to that task, using every possible means of political, economic, military, and diplomatic aggression to achieve a success that will continue to cost the people of the world dearly. End of section and end of chapter.